Okay, I hope this is working. So hi everyone, and thank you for taking the time to watch this presentation. My name is Kevin, and I'll be talking about DOM manipulation. So this is not a new topic. We were able to learn about it during the last week. It was great, right? So this time I'm not gonna take that long. I'll try to summarize the most important principles and concepts. And we will start by defining or providing a definition of the DOM. What's a DOM? So DOM stands for the Document Object Model, and it is a set of APIs for controlling HTML and styling information that makes heavy use of the document object. We will learn what the document object is later on. And since we are talking about the document object, that means it is running within the web browser. And we might think that we have limitations as web browsers are complicated, but that is not really the case, right? And those limitations are not a bad thing at all. But certain features are locked down within the web browser for good reasons, mostly for security reasons. And that means most of the things that we do, right, will run within the web page, within the web browser. And that's the concept behind the DOM, the document object model. And despite the limitations, the web APIs, which is what we use to manipulate the DOM, they still give access to a lot of full functionality that enable us to do a great many things with web pages. So let's consider this little diagram in here. Now we have a classic web browser window, and we can see three different elements in here: the navigator, the window, and the document. Right. The window is a browser tab that web page is loaded into. The navigator represents the state and the identity of the web browser. And the document, which is what we will be studying, is represented by the DOM, or the document object model, within the web browser. It is the actual web page loaded into the window, and it is represented in JavaScript by the document object model. By the way, we use JavaScript to manipulate it because we do it dynamically. And so what's the document? The document interface is the representation of any web page loaded in the web browser, and it serves as an entry point into the web page's content, which is a DOM tree. Let's keep this in mind. The document is not like a simple piece of paper, right? It is a tree because the DOM consists of child elements, parent elements. There are different levels, hierarchies, and all that, right? Containers, right? Contained elements, and many others, right? So the document interface describes the common properties and methods for any kind of document. We need to keep this in mind as well, methods and properties, right? And all this, we can find it in the official documentation from Mozilla, right? For the document API. We don't need to know them all, right? We can always come back and check the documentation to learn new things and to refresh certain concepts that we don't remember that clear, right? That's what a good developer does, right? Make proper use of documentation. So in here we can have all the properties of the document, the events, and methods, right? We will see what they are. Okay. And yeah, let's continue. Let's define what the properties are. Let's start with these. Let's think of them as elements that belong to one specific entity. Let's say that entity is a web page or the document, right? And some of the properties are the color, for example, the size, the fonts, and also certain elements within that entity that they have their own properties, right? So we can understand it better. There are many other properties, right? And let's see some of those examples. The document .with, we have this is how we access all those properties through document dot and then the property we need to access. Many of them are read-only, so we are not able to change them, right? Many of them can be changed, right? But yes, this is how we access them. Document full screen, document first element child, and many others. So the next element is the document methods. Add in some action. And why action? Because methods, we can think of methods kind of like functions, right? And functions define actions. They can take actions, right? And we will see more about it. So a method in computer science is a procedure associated with a message and an object. So in this case, the object is a document, right? And and within the document, we can take certain actions. That's why we're referring to methods as actions. For example, document.append. We know this one. We use this one in one little exercise to append our favorite chapters from the Book of Mormon. And with append, right, we add a new element to the DOM tree, right? And that's an action, right? We are taking the action of adding a new element that we define to the DOM tree. Another action, right, or method, action we can take through the method is a query selector. And we might think that, but hey, through the query selector, we're just getting an instance of an element based on the ID or the class and all that. And yeah, I would say that's an action, right? Because we are executing the action of returning an actual element based on the ID or the class, right? We already used this one as well. And this one is very similar, but this exclusively gets the element by the ID instead of the class or the type of the element. And there are many others, right? We can always check them in the official documentation. And then we have the events. What just happened? Why do we say this? Because with events, something happens, right? Let's see what this is. An event is an action or occurrence recognized by software, right? So when something happens, we can recognize it with the software, right? Often that event originates asynchronously from the external environment. That means that comes from an interaction with a human. And there are other events that don't need interaction with a human, right? There are many types of events, and that may be handled by the software as well. We can basically handle everything with the software related to the events, as long as we define what we need to do. But again, there are certain events that come from the platform and not from interactions with an actual user, right? Some examples: animation events, right? Animation, this is a good example of events that happen without the interaction of a user, because we can define an animation that happens immediately without doing nothing, just right when the page loads, when the web page loads. And also keyboard events. This one involves the user, right? When we type in the keyboard, when we press certain keys, drag and drop events, load and unload events. We can even create an event listener to know when a web page is loading. That's very useful. And then the pointer events, right, involves as well a user, right? When we handle and manipulate the mouse pointer, right? Of course, within these, all these are sections, like the animation events, keyboard events. There are type of events. Within them, we can find the specific names, so we can access and execute and handle those events. we can always go back to the documentation to learn more about them. Yeah, and those are all the elements we need to know and understand in order to properly manipulate DOM. Remember, we can use all of them to make a responsive site, right? It doesn't matter the size of your screen, of the viewport, right? It doesn't matter if it's slightly larger, right? Or if it is the biggest one. Right? We can always have control of everything if we properly define what we need to do and what we want to do as well. And wow, I don't want to take that long, so let's practice some of these key concepts so we don't get bored, right? Thank you, by the way, for the time. You can find me like this, right, in GitHub. So yeah, I have this. This documentation is very useful. So I have this in Code Sandbox. This is a very useful tool where you can code, right, web pages in the web if you don't want to use your local text editor or code editor. I don't want to open mine because that's connected to the repository right now. I don't want to mess with it. So let's use this one. I have defined this simple web page in here. I have added certain divs, right? Like this one, I have some very basic style, not the most creative guy in the world. But this is gonna work pretty well for the example, right? As you can see in here, there's this example div that has a background color red, and the display property is set to none, so that's why it is not displaying in here, right? So if we take it out, the div should be shown in here, like this one, yeah, in red, right? Oh, let's hide it again. There we go. Yeah, so if we remove this line, it will disappear and show again, but that's not what we want to do. We want to do it dynamically, right? And yeah, so we did a little exercise with that on the last week. So I'm pretty sure this is definitely not something new for you guys. But let's try to play with it a little bit. Let's try to create a new file and name it script.js. Oh my God, not wearing my glasses. So the first thing we need to do, I want to take certain actions from here, from the button, and that's an event, right? So let's remember that. I want to do something through the event, and the event is click, right? Click when I click this button. So in order to do that, we need to add an event listener, right? So let's try to do that through the document that query selector. And here we define that we want to use a button, then add event listener. The event that we need to listen to is a click, right? Then we will return a function or a method, right? Because we will take certain actions. What will we do after we click the button? We want to show, for example, the div that is hidden. Let's go ahead and do that. Documented query selector. It was called example, if I'm not wrong, yeah, example. Then we can display it by accessing the property, which we just discussed in the presentation of the style that, sorry about it, a style that display. Let's say it will be block, right? So it is shown in there. We need to include that in the web page. be a script. So let's try to add it in here. So script source. How's it called? Script JS. The autocomplete is not that smart in here. But yeah, we have it. Right. If we click the button, if we're listening to the event, it will do nothing because what are we doing wrong? We are trying to do this before the web pages loads. So in another class, right, we were able to see that if we move this little line to down here, for example, which is completely allowed, it will work, right? We can do that. That's not a problem, right? And that is definitely a good practice because the web page needs to load, but there will be some times in which we need to do certain things immediately after the web page loads. And as we were discussing in the presentation, we can actually have access to that event by adding an event listener and know where when the web page is loading. So let's try to do that. Remember that all those are properties of the document. We have access to them through the document. So let's do document that add event listener. And that, what's the name of that event? The name of the event is DOM content loaded. If I'm not wrong, if I'm mistaken, I'll go back to the documentation. That's not a problem. Then after we do that, we need a function. And what that function will do, right? Oh my bad. Once we know the web page has loaded, we can do that with the button. Oh, there's something I'm missing in here. Okay. What am I missing in here? DOM content loaded. Click it, it's fine. Oh, yeah, this is something very dumb. Yeah, this is not an element. Instead, it is a class, right? So we need to access it through the class. And here we go. Yeah, now it works. And then we can do something additional with this little button, right? Kind of like playing the same way we did in the previous in the exercise of last week. We can use the append method, right? So we can keep learning about methods. Let's try to do this. Let's try to, and we can play with variables as well, just to show you. And store a document element within a variable. We will create an element. This is another method. This is another action. We will create a paragraph element in here. Then the paragraph inner HTML, which is a property, right? So what does it contain? It contains a text that says this is a text. I'm sorry, I'm not wearing my glasses. I can't find them. Give me a second, guys. Yeah, this is better. Right? I wasn't able to see that dot before that was causing the code not to work properly, but now I think it will be better. And yeah, here we go. Let's move these up a little bit so we can use these variables within this this function. Now let's do this document the query selector. We will add that paragraph element to a div, right? We need to access the properties and set the event. So what do we need to do? The query selector again to access the specific element. It's going to be example 2, I guess it's called. Right? Then the method or the action or the method to perform the action of adding an element within that div is append child, right? We want to append a child element, and it's going to be a paragraph. There we go, right? And that should work. If we click it, right, we added this is a text in here, right? And we are also displaying this little div up here. And then everything has a property, methods. As I said before, we just need to know what we need to do. We just need to know exactly what we are accessing or what we are trying to have access to. And the last example, perhaps we can do this something with this little paragraph that we are adding there. Let's use paragraph. That variable, it's already defined, so we can use it in here. That we can add an event listener. We can listen to a click, right? And through that click, right, we will return a function. We'll use an arrow function. And we can do paragraphs that remove. This is a very simple method. This method performs the action of removing a child element. So we can do this. We add the element, and when we click it, it's gone. Right? So it is listening to this. So this is all, guys. I don't want to take that long. I really appreciate your time. I'm sorry for publishing the presentation this late, right? But I hope I was able to communicate clearly these ideas, and thank you again. Thank you again for your time. And I hope you have a great night. It is nighttime in here. So thank you again for your time. Bye-bye.